Ethan Cole had everything a man could want. At least, that's what everyone believed. From the outside, his life looked like the American dream in its purest form. He owned one of the largest franchise networks in Texas, restaurants, gyms, even luxury car dealerships. His name was printed in business magazines, his face on financial podcasts, his words quoted as gospel by young entrepreneurs who saw him as a symbol of success. But behind the golden gates of his mansion in Dallas, Ethan Cole was a man quietly falling apart. He woke up each morning in a bed that cost more than most people's annual salary. Yet he hadn't known a peaceful night of sleep in years. He lived surrounded by people, assistants, bodyguards, drivers, managers, yet he had never felt so alone. His wife, Lavra, once the love of his life, now barely spoke to him except to argue. Their 2 teenage children, Ryan and Chloe, treated him like a stranger who occasionally appeared in the hallway between flights and meetings. Ethan had built an empire, but he'd lost his home. Every morning was the same. Coffee poured by a maid he didn't even look at, emails before sunrise, calls with lawyers, meetings about expansion, partnerships, margins. His phone never stopped ringing, but his heart had stopped feeling long ago. He told himself that money was freedom. But lately, it felt more like a cage made of numbers. Even the view from his office, the Dallas skyline stretching beneath a blue sky, didn't impress him anymore. He stared at it, day after day, with an emptiness that no achievement could fill. His reflection on the glass looked tired, older than his 48 years. The man who once dreamed of building something meaningful now couldn't even remember why he started. At lunch, he met investors. At dinner, he met bankers. And somewhere between contracts and celebrations, he had stopped being a man and turned into a machine. That night, like so many others, Ethan came home late. It was almost 2 a.m. The mansion was silent. Even the air felt heavy, as if the walls themselves were tired of him. He loosened his tie, poured himself a glass of whiskey, and stared at the reflection of city lights dancing on the liquid. His therapist had called it existential burnout. He called it nothingness. He used to think depression was for weak people, until he felt it crawling inside him. A gray fog that numbed everything. Success had become meaningless. Applause, noise. He had followers but no friends, assets but no peace. As he walked through the marble hallway toward his office, he passed by the family portraits hanging on the wall-pulled photos from happier times. Laura's smile, the kids as toddlers, his arm around them. He paused for a second, then kept walking. The man in those photos was gone. He sat at his desk, turned on the screen, and opened the latest sales report. Numbers filled the page, profits up, franchises growing, but none of it made him feel alive. He sighed, rubbed his temples, and closed his laptop. The silence pressed in. It was the kind of silence that screamed. Outside, thunder rolled. Rain began tapping against the wide glass windows. Somewhere deep inside, a small ache pulsed, the feeling that life had moved on and he'd missed it. That's when he heard it. A faint sound, something from the kitchen. At first, he ignored it. Maybe one of the cleaning staff forgot to lock a cabinet. But then it came again, the soft clinking of silverware, a chair moving quietly, almost guiltily. He frowned. The entire staff should have been asleep hours ago. He paid them well, made sure schedules were strict. No one was supposed to be awake this late. Curiosity, or maybe boredom, made him rise from the chair. He walked through the hall, his expensive shoes echoing against the marble. The lights were dim, casting long shadows on the floor. As he approached the kitchen, he slowed his steps. Through the slightly open door, he saw a flicker of movement. Someone was inside. He pushed the door a little wider, silently. The sight froze him. There, under the soft yellow light above the stove, his maid, Martha, was kneeling beside the counter. She had a small plate in her hands, filled with what looked like scraps from dinner, Pieces of chicken, some rice, half a roll of bread. She was eating slowly, carefully, as if afraid to make noise. Ethan's first instinct was anger. Was she stealing food in his house? But before he could step forward, something stopped him. Martha wasn't just eating, she was praying. Her eyes were closed, her hands trembling slightly as she whispered, "Thank you, Lord, for this food. Thank you for another day." Ethan's jaw tightened. She was thanking God for leftovers. He watched, speechless, as she ate with quiet gratitude, the kind of peace he hadn't felt in decades. Her face looked tired, but serene. The wrinkles around her eyes spoke of years of struggle, but her smile, faint, gentle, carried something he couldn't name. He felt a strange mix of emotions rise in his chest: confusion, guilt, curiosity. The woman in front of him lived on a salary smaller than what he spent on a single dinner, yet she looked content. For a moment, he felt ashamed. Ashamed of his anger, his wealth, his emptiness. He took a quiet step back, afraid to interrupt. His heart pounded in his chest, not from fear, but from something deeper, something he couldn't explain. He turned and walked away, slowly, the sound of rain outside blending with the quiet clatter of her spoon. He didn't sleep that night. And for the first time in years, Ethan Cole, the billionaire everyone envied, felt like the poorest man in the world. Ethan couldn't shake the image from his mind. The sound of the spoon against the plate, the whispered prayer, the look of peace on Martha's face. He lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, while the rain whispered against the windows. Lovra slept beside him, breathing softly, untouched by the storm in his chest. For once, it wasn't insomnia keeping him awake, it was conviction. At dawn, he sat on the edge of his bed, elbows on his knees, trying to make sense of it. Why had that moment disturbed him so deeply? She wasn't stealing, she wasn't doing anything wrong. So why did it feel like a mirror being held up to his soul? He tried to shake it off, told himself it didn't matter. By 8 at gym, he was in his car, another day, another deal. But all through his meetings, the image stayed with him, that dim kitchen, that soft prayer, that simple gratitude. At lunch, while sitting across from two investors at a country club, Ethan found himself staring blankly at his untouched steak. One of the men laughed at a joke about poor people working 2 jobs, and Ethan felt something twist in his stomach. He wasn't sure if it was disgust for the man or for himself. When he got home that evening, he went straight to his study. The house was quiet, the usual chatter of maids and gardeners replaced by silence. He asked the head housekeeper where Martha was. "She's finishing up in the laundry room, sir," the woman said. "Send her to my office when she's done." Minutes later, Martha appeared, small, humble, wearing her uniform neatly pressed. Her gray hair was tied back in a bun, and her hands were still damp from washing. She looked nervous. "Mr. Cole, you wanted to see me?" Ethan leaned back in his chair, unsure where to start. He didn't want to embarrass her, but he also couldn't pretend he hadn't seen what he saw. "Martha," he began, his voice more gentle than usual, "last night I noticed you were in the kitchen. Late." Her eyes widened slightly. She looked down, her fingers fidgeting with her apron. "Yes, sir. I'm sorry, sir. I was just cleaning up and you were eating," he interrupted softly. "Leftovers." A pause. Martha's shoulders tensed. "Yes, sir. I didn't mean any harm. I just didn't want the food to go to waste." "I should have asked, you prayed," Ethan said quietly. She froze. "Yes, sir," she whispered. "I always do." Ethan studied her face. There was no shame there, only humility. He didn't sense guilt, only gratitude. He took a deep breath. "Why? You thank God for scraps?" Her eyes lifted slowly, meeting his. For a second, Ethan felt as though the entire room had gone still. "Because there's still food," she said softly. "And food means another day. God's been good to me, Mr. Cole. Better than I deserve." He didn't know how to respond. The words hit him harder than he expected. "Martha," he said after a long pause, "you've worked here for, what, 5 years?" "6, sir." "And you live alone?" She smiled faintly. "No, sir. I live with my sister and my niece. They both have health problems. I help take care of them." Ethan nodded slowly, his throat tight. "And you're part of a church, right?" Her eyes brightened. "Yes, sir. I serve at New Hope Chapel. It's small, but it's home. I help the pastor on weekends. We take food to the shelters, visit hospitals, pray for folks." She hesitated. "Sometimes we feed people who have less than I do." Ethan swallowed hard, his hands clasped together on the desk. He couldn't remember the last time he'd done something for someone without expecting a return. He couldn't remember the last time anyone had spoken about life with such simplicity and peace. "You've been through a lot, haven't you?" he asked quietly. Martha's smile faded. She looked down at her hands. "Yes, sir. More than I like to talk about." He didn't press, but something in her eyes told him there was a story buried there, a painful one. She stood there humbly, waiting to be dismissed, while he sat frozen, unable to end the conversation. Finally, he said, "You can take tomorrow off. Spend time with your family." Her eyes widened again. "Oh no, sir, I couldn't." "It's not a request," Ethan said, but his tone was kind. "Please, rest." She nodded slowly, her expression softening. "Thank you, Mr. Cole. God bless you." When she left the room, Ethan sat for a long time, staring at the empty doorway. Those 3 words, "God bless you," echoed in his mind like a whisper he couldn't silence. That night, he couldn't eat. The thought of her sitting on the kitchen floor, thanking God for scraps of his family's dinner, haunted him. He tried to drink it away, but even the whiskey tasted bitter. At midnight, he found himself walking back to the kitchen again. The lights were off. The counters were clean. But he could still see her there, small, faithful, unseen. He leaned against the counter, feeling the cold marble beneath his hand. "What happened to me?" he whispered. The sound of the refrigerator's hum was the only reply. For the first time in years, Ethan knelt, not because he believed, not because he knew what to say, but because he didn't know what else to do. He stayed there for a while, staring at the floor, his chest heavy with something he couldn't name, guilt, maybe, or grief for the man he'd become. And in that silence, another thought rose, clear as a bell. If she can thank God for leftovers, what excuse do I have for not thanking him at all? He stood slowly, his hands trembling, and looked out the kitchen window. The storm had passed. The sky was clearing. Somewhere out there, Martha was probably praying again for people who didn't even know her name. And Ethan Cole, billionaire, felt smaller than ever before. But somewhere beneath that shame, a spark of something unfamiliar began to glow. Not anger, not pride. Something softer, curiosity. He wanted to understand. He wanted to know how a woman with nothing could feel richer than a man who had everything. The next morning, as the sun broke through the clouds, Ethan made a quiet decision. He was going to visit her church. Not to make a donation, not to be seen, just to understand. He didn't tell his wife. He didn't tell anyone. He just knew that for the first time in a very long time, he wasn't chasing profit. He was chasing peace. Sunday morning came quietly. The mansion was still half asleep when Ethan's car pulled out of the driveway. He didn't tell Laura where he was going, just said he needed some air. For once, his driver wasn't with him. No security, no assistance, no polished suit. Just Ethan, a plain shirt, and a question burning in his chest. He followed the GPS out of the wealthy district, across the bridge, past the shiny skyscrapers and manicured lawns. The farther he drove, the older the streets became, cracked pavement, faded murals, houses with peeling paint. It felt like entering another world. The address Martha had once mentioned, New Hope Chapel, was easy to miss. A small white building on a corner lot. The sign out front was crooked, the paint fading. But there were people outside, families, children, elderly couples, smiling, hugging, greeting each other like family. Ethan parked across the street. For a moment, he hesitated. He hadn't set foot in a church since his father's funeral more than 20 years ago. Back then, all he remembered feeling was anger. He took a deep breath and stepped out of the car. Inside, the chapel was small, maybe 50 seats total, but it felt alive. The air was filled with singing. The sound wasn't polished or rehearsed, but it was real. People sang like they meant every word. Martha was near the front, wearing a simple blue dress, eyes closed, hands raised. She looked nothing like the quiet maid from his kitchen. She looked radiant, free. Ethan sat in the back, unnoticed. He didn't know the songs, didn't understand the rituals, but he felt something there, something he couldn't explain. Warmth, peace, a presence he hadn't felt in years. After the music ended, the pastor, a kind-faced man in his 60s, stepped up to the podium. But instead of preaching, he smiled at the crowd and said, "This morning, our sister Martha has something she'd like to share." Ethan straightened. "Martha, speaking?" She stepped forward slowly, holding a small Bible. Her hands trembled slightly, but her voice, when it came, was steady. "Good morning, family," she said. "I wasn't always this woman you see today. There was a time when I didn't think I'd live to see another morning." The room went silent. Ethan leaned forward, listening. "I was born in Mississippi," she continued. "We were poor, really poor. My parents were lost in drugs and anger when I was 9. They sold me." Her voice faltered, but she pressed on. "They sold me to a man who promised them money and a better life. But that man, he wasn't a savior. He was a monster." The congregation listened with tears in their eyes. Ethan's heart began to race. He could barely breathe. "For years I lived in darkness," she said softly. "I was abused, beaten, forgotten. I ran away when I was 15 and lived on the streets. I should have died out there, cold, hungry, angry at the world. But one day, someone from a little church like this found me. They fed me. They prayed for me. They told me something I'd never heard before, that I was loved, that God still saw me." Her voice broke for the first time. "That day changed everything. I gave my heart to Christ, and slowly, He began to heal what life had broken. I forgave the people who hurt me, not because they deserved it, but because I couldn't carry the pain anymore." Martha paused, eyes closed, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Today, I work as a maid. I don't have much, but I have peace. I have joy. I have family, here, and in the Lord. And I've learned something. Sometimes the greatest riches don't come from what's in your wallet, but what's in your heart." A soft murmur of amen filled the room. Ethan felt something break inside him. He wanted to look away, but he couldn't. Her words pierced through every layer of pride and ego he'd built. Here was a woman who had been through hell, yet she stood taller than him. She had nothing, yet she had everything. As the service ended, people came to hug Martha. She smiled, prayed for them, laughed softly. Ethan stayed in the back, unsure what to do. He felt out of place. Expensive watch, designer shoes, in a room full of people who'd lost more and still found joy. When the crowd began to thin, he finally walked toward her. She turned and froze for a moment, surprised to see him there. "Mr. Cole," she whispered, eyes wide. Ethan smiled awkwardly. "I hope you don't mind. I wanted to see what this was all about." Martha wiped her eyes, still smiling. "You came all the way here?" He nodded. "I did." She looked up, almost embarrassed. "I'm sorry if my story was too much." "No," he said quickly. "It wasn't too much. It was honest." They stood there in the small church aisle, the sunlight streaming through the windows, casting gold on the worn wooden pews. "Can I ask you something?" Ethan said. "Of course." When you talk about forgiveness, he hesitated. Do you really mean it? After everything? Martha nodded slowly. Yes, sir. I had to. Forgiveness isn't saying what they did was right. It's just saying I won't let it control me anymore. I don't want to live chained to anger. Ethan looked down, silent. Her words felt like medicine he didn't know he needed. I wish I could believe like you do, he murmured. Martha smiled gently. You can. It's not about religion, Mr. Cole. It's about surrender. Sometimes God has to let us lose everything, so we can finally see what really matters. He looked up at her, eyes wet. You really think he still cares about people like me? She nodded. Especially people like you. Something in those words cracked open a space inside him that had been locked for years. Ethan walked out of that church feeling both broken and alive. The noise of traffic outside sounded distant. The sunlight felt warmer. He didn't know what had just happened, but something had happened. That night when he got home, Laura noticed the change immediately. You're quiet, she said at dinner. Did something happen at work? He smiled faintly. No, not at work. She raised an eyebrow but didn't press further. He didn't know how to explain that the woman cleaning their kitchen had just shaken the foundations of his soul. Later, when everyone was asleep, he stood again in the same kitchen where he'd first seen Martha that night. The air felt different now, sacred somehow. He closed his eyes, remembering her voice. Forgiveness isn't saying they were right. It's saying I'm done being chained. He whispered into the quiet. I think I'm tired of being chained too. And that was the moment it began, the slow unraveling of the old Ethan Cole and the quiet birth of a new one. But he had no idea how far this road would take him, or how the same woman he once pitied would lead him to the very thing he'd been searching for all his life. The next Sunday, Ethan was back at New Hope Chapel. This time, he didn't hesitate at the door. He slipped quietly into a seat in the back, blending in with the crowd. The same warm singing filled the air. The same old ceiling fans rattled above, but for Ethan, everything felt new. It was strange how a place so small could feel so alive. As the choir sang, he caught himself mouthing the words, not because he knew them, but because they stirred something in him. He couldn't explain it. It wasn't logic or profit or power. It was peace. A feeling he hadn't known since childhood. After the service, Martha spotted him again. Back so soon? She teased gently, her eyes sparkling. Ethan smiled. Guess I needed another sermon. Martha laughed. The best ones aren't always from the pulpit, sir. He nodded, thinking about that. The truth was, she was right. Her entire life was a sermon. That afternoon, Ethan didn't rush home. He stayed behind, talking to a few church members, people who worked as janitors, teachers, drivers, cooks. They didn't know who he was. They just welcomed him, offered him coffee, asked how he was doing. No one wanted anything from him. It felt disarming. When he got back to his mansion, the difference between those two worlds hit him hard. The marble floors, the designer furniture, the massive chandelier, it all looked empty. For the first time, he realized how quiet the house truly was. Over the next few weeks, he kept going back to church. Every Sunday, the same simple songs, the same cracked pews, the same people who hugged each other like family. And slowly, something inside Ethan began to thaw. He started praying, awkwardly at first, then more sincerely. At night, instead of scrolling through emails, he'd read the little Bible Martha had given him. Some verses didn't make sense. Others hit too close to home. But he couldn't stop reading. It was like discovering a language his heart already knew. One morning, Martha found him sitting outside by the garden before work, coffee in hand, staring at the sunrise. Beautiful, isn't it? She said, standing beside him. He nodded. I've seen 1,000 sunrises, but I never really looked at one. She smiled softly. When the heart changes, the eyes change too. He turned to her. You really believe people can change that much? I don't just believe it, she said. I've lived it. He nodded, taking that in. There was something about Martha. Her peace wasn't loud, but it was real. The kind of peace money couldn't buy. Later that week, Ethan decided to tell his wife the truth. Lovra was in the living room, flipping through a magazine when he sat down beside her. There's something I need to tell you, he said. She looked up, cautious. What is it? I've been going to church, he said quietly. She blinked. Church? You? Yeah, it's complicated. But I met someone. Martha, our maid, she told me her story. And it made me realize how lost I've been. Lavra didn't say anything for a long moment. Finally, she put the magazine down inside. Ethan, if this is another one of your phases. It's not, he said firmly. It's different this time. I don't know how to explain it, but I feel like I'm waking up from a long sleep. Lavra studied him. For the first time in years, she saw something in his eyes that she hadn't seen before. Not ambition, not stress, but sincerity. I don't know if I believe in all that, she admitted. But maybe I could come with you, just once. He smiled. I'd like that. The following Sunday, Ethan arrived at New Hope Chapel with Lavra by his side. The congregation welcomed her like family. Martha greeted her warmly, without judgment or awkwardness. And when the music began, something unexpected happened. Lavra cried. Quietly, discreetly, but genuinely. Later that day in the car, she turned to Ethan and whispered, I don't know what that was, but I felt something. He nodded. Me too. From that day on, they went together, every week. Sometimes with the kids, sometimes alone. The house that once felt like a museum began to fill with laughter again. Dinner conversations turned real. Apologies were spoken that had been buried for years. Ethan began noticing small miracles in everyday life. Patience where there used to be anger. Gratitude where there used to be greed. But change isn't always easy. And for a man who'd built his entire life on control, surrender was terrifying. One evening, while locking up his office, he stopped and looked at the photo of his old company launch, the smiling, younger version of himself holding a trophy. That man looked unstoppable, but he also looked empty. Ethan whispered to the picture, You won everything, but you lost yourself. He took the photo down and set it in a drawer. The next Sunday, the pastor spoke about purpose, how God can use even broken people to rebuild others. Those words hit Ethan like a lightning bolt. He looked around the room, single mothers, recovering addicts, immigrants, people who'd lost everything but still sang with joy. And for the first time, he didn't just see them. He saw himself among them. After the service, he approached the pastor. Pastor James, right? Yes, sir, the older man said with a warm smile. I've seen you a few times now. What's your name, son? Ethan Cole. The pastor's eyebrows lifted slightly, clearly recognizing the name. The businessman? Ethan nodded, uncomfortable. That's me. Or, it was. Pastor James chuckled softly. And who do you want to be now? Ethan paused. Someone who doesn't waste his life. The pastor smiled. Then maybe God brought you here for a reason. Those words lingered in Ethan's mind all week. He couldn't stop thinking about them. Maybe God brought you here for a reason. One night, he sat in his office again, staring at the walls filled with business awards and certificates. He realized every plaque, every headline, every deal. All of it meant nothing if it didn't help anyone but himself. He looked out the window at the city lights, the same skyline that used to make him feel powerful, and whispered, what if I could use it for something good? That question wouldn't let him go. It followed him into his dreams. It woke him up before dawn. And by the next Sunday, he had an idea, something bold, something that would shock everyone in his world. He waited until the end of the service, then approached Martha and the pastor. I want to help, he said. Pastor James smiled kindly. We're always grateful for volunteers. Ethan shook his head. No, I want to help the church grow, to reach more people, to make it bigger. They exchanged a surprised glance. You mean, like start another branch? The pastor asked. Ethan nodded. Exactly. I know how to build things. I've built hundreds of businesses. I can help you build this too, the right way. Martha looked at him, eyes wide. You do that? He smiled. I think it's time I start building something that actually matters. The pastor placed a hand on his shoulder, his voice calm but filled with emotion. Then let's pray on it, son, because what you're saying could change everything. Ethan nodded slowly, feeling a strange mix of fear and peace. He didn't know it yet, but this decision, born out of faith, humility, and a single act of gratitude, would transform not just his life, but thousands more. The change began slowly, like dawn creeping over a dark horizon. Ethan started waking up earlier, not to check his phone or read stock reports, but just to watch the sunrise from the patio. He began saying good morning to the staff by name. He asked about their families. He even apologized to one of the gardeners he'd once yelled at for trimming the wrong hedge. It was as if the man who had ruled his world with control was finally learning to see people. Laura noticed it first. She found him one morning making breakfast for the first time in their entire marriage. Pancakes. Burnt, messy, but real. What are you doing? She asked, half laughing, half shocked. Ethan grinned sheepishly. Trying to remember what a kitchen feels like when it's not just a backdrop. She laughed, a sound he hadn't heard from her in years. And in that laughter, something inside both of them began to heal. The kids noticed next. Ryan, their 17-year-old son, had grown used to his father being a ghost, a man whose love came in the form of credit cards and advice about business. So when Ethan showed up at his basketball game unannounced, sitting in the front row and cheering louder than anyone else, Ryan's expression said it all. Who are you, and what did you do with my dad? Chloe, the youngest, still kept her guard up. She'd built quiet walls after years of broken promises. But when Ethan sat with her one evening, helping her with a school art project, his expensive shirt stained with glue, those walls began to crack too. It wasn't perfect. There were awkward silences, emotional missteps, moments where guilt tried to drag him back. But love, slow, patient, awkward love, was finding its way home. Sundays became sacred again. Not for brunch at the country club, but for something deeper. The family went together to New Hope Chapel, sitting side by side in the small wooden pews. They sang, they prayed. They laughed at the children running down the aisles after service. They felt alive. Lovra often found herself wiping away tears during the sermons, not from sadness, but from relief. For years, she'd felt invisible in her own marriage. Now Ethan was present, listening, holding her hand during prayer, smiling at her like it was the first time. One afternoon, as they drove home from church, she turned to him and said quietly, "I like this version of you." Ethan smiled. "So do I." Their home began to change too. Conversations replaced arguments. Dinners weren't silent anymore. Laughter echoed in rooms that had known nothing but tension. Even the staff seemed lighter, smiling more, relaxed around their once feared boss. But transformation, Ethan was learning, came with an unexpected side effect: clarity. He began to see the emptiness behind the empire he'd built. The constant chase for profit, the meetings that meant nothing, the awards gathering dust on the shelves, all of it looked hollow now. He didn't want to just be successful. He wanted to be useful. That's when he remembered his conversation with Pastor James and the promise he'd made to help the church grow. He spent days sketching ideas on paper, something he hadn't done in years. Plans, charts, strategy. He wasn't thinking like a CEO anymore. He was dreaming like a believer. When he finally sat down with Pastor James and Martha, his eyes shone with a quiet excitement. "I've been thinking," Ethan said, spreading his notes across the small church table. "You don't need money, you need structure. I can help you build it. Pastor James leaned in, curious. Go on. Ethan pointed to the paper. You've got heart, community, and faith, but no system. That's what stops small churches from growing. I know how to scale things. If we organize right, we can reach more people, new neighborhoods, maybe even other cities. Martha's eyes filled with tears. You'd really do that for us? Ethan smiled. No, Martha. I'd do it with you. Pastor James sat back, stunned. Son, that's ambitious. Ethan chuckled. Yeah, but this time, it's not about profit margins. It's about people. They prayed together right there, in the small office that smelled of coffee and old books. It was the first time Ethan had ever bowed his head and truly meant it. When he said amen, something in his chest loosened, like a chain snapping. Over the next few months, Ethan threw himself into the project. He brought in designers, accountants, volunteers. He used his network to fund small expansions, not with arrogance, but with purpose. The church launched new community programs, free meals, counseling, job training. Martha began leading women's groups for survivors of abuse. Laura started volunteering in youth ministry, surprising even herself. Ryan began helping with tech and social media. Chloe sang in the choir. What had once been a single small church on a forgotten street corner became a movement. Every Sunday, more people came. And every week, Ethan's heart grew lighter. He laughed more, slept better, smiled easier. One evening, as he stood in the back of the sanctuary watching families arrive, Martha approached him quietly. You look at peace, she said. He nodded. For the first time in my life, I think I am. She smiled. You see, God doesn't waste anything, not even pain. He just redeems it. Ethan looked at her, truly looked at her, the woman who'd changed his life by eating leftovers in his kitchen, and felt tears well in his eyes. You were right, Martha, he said. Forgiveness changes everything. But Martha shook her head gently. No, Mr. Cole, God changes everything. We just have to let him. Ethan smiled, humbled. For once, he didn't argue. That night he drove home, the radio off, his heart full. Laura met him at the door with a hug that didn't need words. The kids were laughing in the living room. The house didn't feel like a museum anymore. It felt like home. But as Ethan lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, another thought came to him, one that made his heart race. The church was growing faster than anyone expected. Donations were flooding in. Lives were changing. And with growth came responsibility and risk. He didn't know it yet, but this beautiful season of light was about to be tested by shadows he never saw coming. The idea started as a sketch on Ethan's desk, 3 circles and an arrow connecting them. Community, faith, structure. It was a simple diagram, but it became the backbone of what would soon be known as the New Hope Expansion Project. He met weekly with Pastor James and Martha, often in a little church office that barely fit 3 chairs. There, surrounded by old hymnals and stacks of Bibles, Ethan outlined his plan, not as a tycoon, but as a servant with a purpose. This isn't about making money, he said one evening, tapping the paper. It's about sustainability. Churches fall apart because they depend on donations that rise and fall. But if we teach business principles, stewardship, transparency, growth, we can create something lasting. Pastor James nodded slowly. You're speaking my language, son. Kingdom work needs kingdom wisdom. Martha smiled, watching Ethan's excitement. Who would have thought, she said softly, that the man who once ruled the city's franchises would be building God's? Ethan chuckled. Yeah, guess I changed management. Over the next months, things moved fast. Ethan used his connections carefully, never flaunting his name. He approached trusted friends, a contractor here, a printer there, a marketing expert who owed him a favor. Every piece fell into place. They opened a second New Hope chapel on the other side of Dallas. Within 6 months, it was full. Then came a third, a fourth, a fifth. Each new location kept its humble look. No fancy lighting, no big screens, just people, music, prayer, and hope. But they were organized, efficient, clean. The community noticed. People who'd given up on faith began showing up again. Ethan often stood in the back, watching quietly as families filled the pews. He never took credit. He didn't want applause. For the first time, the work itself was enough. At home, the transformation continued. Laura, once skeptical, had become deeply involved, organizing charity events and food drives. Ryan started tutoring underprivileged kids through the church's youth program. Chloe led a group for young singers. The Coles, once the coldest family in the neighborhood, were now a story of grace whispered in the city's coffee shops and offices. But not everyone was pleased. Whispers began, small at first. Some of Ethan's old business partners questioned his motives. Why is Cole wasting his time on churches? One executive sneered at a corporate dinner. Is he laundering money or losing his mind? Ethan brushed it off at first. But the seed of doubt was planted. Then came the media attention. Local news outlets picked up the story of the billionaire helping churches grow. Reporters wanted interviews. Investors called, curious if this was a PR stunt. Ethan declined every request. This isn't about publicity, he told Lavra one night. It's sacred. I don't want to cheapen it. But still, the attention grew. Photos leaked. Headlines spun the story in ways he never intended. Franchise king turns faith into business. Ethan Cole's holy investment. Pastor James advised calm. The world will always twist what it doesn't understand, he said gently. Ethan nodded, but unease gnawed at him. Still, the work went on. By the end of the year, New Hope had opened 10 locations across Texas. They had community kitchens, free daycare, job programs. The expansion was clean, transparent, documented, every dollar accounted for. Ethan made sure of it. He often stayed up late, balancing budgets and cross-checking receipts. If we're going to serve God, he'd say, we're going to do it right. Martha sometimes stopped by his office with tea, smiling. You remind me of me when I first found purpose. Couldn't sleep for the excitement. Ethan laughed. I guess I'm just trying to make up for lost time. But behind that laughter, something restless stirred. He wasn't chasing money anymore. He was chasing meaning. And the faster things grew, the more he feared losing control. Then, one evening, during a late meeting at the main church office, Pastor James made an unexpected proposal. Ethan, he said, you've done more for this ministry than anyone ever could. The board and I talked. We want to make you an official partner in the organization, not just a donor or consultant. A co-director, Ethan froze. Pastor, I'm honored, but I'm not qualified. I'm no preacher. James smiled. That's the beauty of it. You don't need to preach. You build, you lead. That's your gift. Ethan sat back, processing. A few years ago, he'd have jumped at the chance for recognition, but now he hesitated. If I accept this, it's not about titles, it's about trust. Exactly, James said. And we trust you. Ethan looked at Martha. She nodded, eyes soft. God didn't save you to sit still, mister. Cole, he saved you to serve. He smiled, humbled. Then let's do it. They prayed together that night, their hands joined over the plans for the next 10 churches. Ethan felt tears burning behind his eyes as he whispered, "Thank you." But even as peace filled the room, a shadow loomed beyond it, unseen but approaching. Because where there is light, darkness always finds a way to follow. In the coming weeks, Ethan noticed small changes. An accountant quit suddenly. A few donations went missing before being found again. A reporter called asking strange questions about financial ties. He brushed it all off as noise. Until one morning, Laura walked into his office holding a newspaper. Her face was pale. "Ethan, have you seen this?" The headline hit him like a punch. Exclusive. Billionaire's church empire under federal review. Allegations of misused funds. He stared at the page, his chest tightening. The article was filled with half-truths, twisted numbers, and insinuations suggesting Ethan was using church money to hide personal assets. None of it was real, but it was believable. He dropped the paper on his desk, his hands trembling. Who would do this? Laura's eyes filled with fear. Someone who wants to destroy everything you've built. Outside, the wind howled against the windows. Inside, Ethan's faith, the very thing that had rebuilt his world, was about to be tested harder than he could imagine. The phone didn't stop ringing. Reporters, investors, lawyers. By noon, Ethan's office was a battlefield of chaos. The story had gone national overnight. News channels, blogs, social media. Everyone had an opinion. Everyone wanted a quote. Billionaire's faith network under federal investigation. It didn't matter that the allegations were false. In the court of public opinion, perception was reality. Lavra tried to hold it together, answering calls, reassuring frightened church staff, but fear hung in the air like smoke. Martha came to the mansion the next morning, tears in her eyes. "They're saying awful things, Mr. Cole. People I've known for years are asking if I knew. If I was part of it. Double quotes. Ethan rubbed his face with both hands. I don't understand. We've been transparent about everything. Every cent is documented." She reached across the table, resting a hand on his arm. "This is an attack, sir. Not from people, from the enemy." He nodded weakly. "I know, but that doesn't make it hurt less." The investigation began immediately. Auditors went through every file, every receipt, every bank transfer. Cameras swarmed the churches. Pastor James, calm as always, tried to reassure the congregation. The truth will stand. But Ethan could see the fear in his eyes. One afternoon, while leaving a meeting, a reporter shoved a microphone in Ethan's face. "Mr. Cole, is it true you funneled church donations into your personal accounts?" Ethan stopped, trembling. "No, that's a lie." "Then why are the federal auditors involved?" "Because someone made sure they would be," Ethan said, and walked away. That clip went viral within hours. His calm defiance was edited into mockery. Headlines twisted it. Cole evades questions about faith funds. The world loved building heroes and loved tearing them down even more. Behind the scenes, Ethan's lawyers traced the source of the leak. It led back to Daniel Reed, a former business partner Ethan had once forced out of a deal years ago for corruption. Daniel had never forgiven him. Now he'd found a way to strike back, not by attacking his wealth, but his faith. The betrayal stung deeper than anything Ethan had felt before. One evening, sitting alone in his study, he looked at the framed photo of the first New Hope Chapel. His hand trembled as he touched the glass. He whispered, "God, why now? Why this?" Silence. Only the sound of rain outside. Then, from the hallway, a soft voice. "You taught me something, remember?" It was Lavra. He looked up, tears in his eyes. "You told me faith isn't about what happens when things are easy," she said gently. "It's about who we become when everything falls apart." He smiled weakly. "And what if I fail that test?" "Then you get back up. That's what faith does." They sat together in silence, holding hands as the rain fell. Outside, flashes of lightning lit the sky, like heaven itself was watching. Days turned into weeks. The investigation dragged on. Members of the church were questioned. Donations slowed. People whispered in grocery stores, in offices, even during Sunday services. Martha bore it with quiet grace. "Let them talk," she said to Ethan one day. "Our job isn't to fight lies with anger. It's to stand still and let truth do what truth does." But Ethan wasn't built to stand still. He wanted to fight back, to defend everything they'd built. Yet something inside him told him to wait. So he did. He showed up every Sunday, sitting in the same seat at the back, head bowed. He smiled at the congregation, even when he felt like crying. He helped stack chairs after service. No press, no speeches, just humility. Then, one morning, the auditors arrived unannounced at his home. They spent 10 hours combing through files, computers, bank accounts. When they left, one of them, a middle-aged man with tired eyes, paused at the door. Cole, he said quietly, I can't tell you details yet. But I'll say this, your records are cleaner than most nonprofits I've ever seen. Ethan blinked, stunned. So, it'll be over soon? The man gave a faint smile. The truth always finds its way. That night, Ethan prayed, not for himself, but for everyone watching. For the church members scared of losing faith. For Martha, whose name had been dragged through mud. For Daniel Reed, the man who had betrayed him. He prayed the hardest for that one. And as he whispered forgiveness through tears, something in him broke, and something else was reborn. He realized faith wasn't proven by miracles or success. It was proven by grace under fire. 2 weeks later, the results came in. All charges were dropped. The Federal Review concluded that the allegations were unfounded. The same reporters who'd chased him for weeks now waited outside the courthouse for a statement. Ethan stepped up to the microphones, calm and steady. I'm not here to gloat, he said. I'm here to thank God for truth. To thank the people who stood by me when it would have been easier to walk away. This wasn't a business test. It was a faith test. And I learned something. Real faith doesn't just build churches. It rebuilds people. The crowd went silent. For a moment, the world stopped. Martha, watching from the crowd, whispered to Pastor James, He's preaching now. The old pastor smiled. Oh, he's been preaching for a while. He just didn't know it. That evening, back at the original New Hope Chapel, the entire congregation gathered. No cameras, no news crews, just family. They sang until their voices cracked. They cried. They laughed. They prayed. At the end of the service, Ethan stood beside Martha, tears in his eyes. You were right, he said softly. God doesn't waste anything, even this, she nodded. He used the fire to purify you, not destroy you. Ethan smiled. And now what? Now, Martha said, you start again, not as a man who fell, but as one who rose. He nodded, emotion thick in his throat. Then let's build again, stronger. But this time, he wasn't just building churches. He was building faith. The storm had come and gone, and though it left scars, it also left something more powerful, conviction. And as he walked out of the church that night, stars breaking through the clouds above, Ethan whispered to himself, if this was the test, then the grace that followed was the reward. Yet even as peace settled back over his life, he had no idea that God was about to multiply what began as one small act of compassion, far beyond anything he could imagine. 2 years later, the city looked different. Or maybe Ethan just saw it with new eyes. New Hope Chapel wasn't one church anymore. It was a family of 32 small campuses stretching across Texas. None of them were grand. Each one smelled faintly of coffee and wood polish. Each one overflowed with laughter and second chances. Ethan refused every suggestion to put his name on a plaque. If anyone asks, he'd say, tell them it was God and a lady named Martha, the Ripple on weekday mornings. He still visited the original chapel, the one that had started it all. Children ran through the courtyard where weeds once grew. Volunteers sorted boxes of donated food, and a sign on the wall read, From leftovers to overflow. Martha had come up with that phrase. She was still the same humble, sharp, always with a gentle joke, but now she oversaw community outreach. Past trauma no longer defined her. It had become her testimony. Every weekend she spoke to women who carried invisible wounds, telling them they were seen, loved, capable of joy again. Grace doesn't erase pain, she'd say. It redeems it. Ethan often stood in the back, listening. No matter how many speeches he gave in boardrooms or conferences, none moved him like her quiet words did. Faith at work, Ethan had returned to his company, but he brought the church with him in spirit, if not in name. He created programs for his employees, financial education, counseling, volunteer days. He opened his board meetings with a moment of silence, not for prayer, but for gratitude. At first, executives thought he'd lost his edge. But soon, the numbers told a different story. Productivity rose, turnover dropped, and the culture changed. People worked harder not out of fear, but out of purpose. "Funny thing," Ethan said to his CFO one afternoon, "when people feel valued, profit follows." The CFO smiled. Guess miracles scale too. Home restored at home. The Coles had become unrecognizable from the family they once were. Laura hosted Bible studies in their living room, laughing easily, her old bitterness replaced by warmth. Ryan studied nonprofit management. He said he wanted to build something that helps. Chloe was applying to college for music therapy. On Sunday nights, they all sat around the same dinner table, phones away, candles lit. The silence that once divided them was gone, replaced by conversation, teasing, prayer. One evening, Ryan asked, "Dad, do you ever miss the old life? The fame, the deals?" Ethan thought for a moment. "Sometimes I miss the chase," he admitted. "But then I remember what I was chasing and what I caught instead." "What's that?" Chloe asked. "Peace," he said simply. The reunion that winter, New Hope held its first statewide gathering. 30 churches, thousands of people, one rented stadium. The energy was electric. Pastor James, frailer now but still smiling, invited Ethan to the stage. The crowd rose to its feet, cheering. Ethan lifted his hands, embarrassed, and shook his head. "I didn't come up here to talk about business," he said. "I came to tell you what God did with a stubborn man who thought he had everything." He told them about the mansion, the loneliness, the night he saw Martha in the kitchen eating leftovers. He told them how shame became curiosity, curiosity became faith, and faith became purpose. By the end, the stadium was silent except for a few sniffles. Ethan looked out at the crowd and said, "You never know what miracle hides in someone you overlook." Sometimes grace enters through the servant's door. Then he stepped aside and gestured toward Martha. The crowd erupted again as she walked to the microphone. She smiled shyly. "All I did was eat," she said, and everyone laughed. Then her tone softened. "But the truth is, all of us have been hungry for hope, for love, for forgiveness. And when we share even the scraps of grace we've been given, God multiplies it." The kitchen again months later, life returned to its gentle rhythm. One quiet evening, Ethan came home after visiting one of the new campuses. The house was calm. Laura was reading, the kids out with friends. He wandered into the kitchen, the same kitchen where his story had turned. The lights were dim, the counter spotless. For a long moment, he just stood there, remembering. The sound of a spoon against a plate, a whispered prayer over leftovers. He opened the refrigerator, found some soup Martha had made earlier for staff, and warmed it on the stove. The smell filled the room. When it was ready, he sat at the small table, folded his hands and whispered, "Thank you for the scraps that saved me." Then he smiled and ate quietly, tears mixing with laughter. Grace multiplied a few weeks later. Ethan invited Martha and the church staff to the house for dinner. It wasn't catered. He cooked himself, burnt edges and all. As they ate, Martha looked around the grand dining room, shaking her head. "Muffa, Cole, you really don't have to go through all this trouble." Ethan grinned. "After everything you've done, it's the least I can do." She smiled, looking at the chandelier above them. "You know what's funny? I used to clean this room in silence. I never thought I'd sit here as a guest." He looked at her, eyes soft. "And I never thought a woman eating leftovers in my kitchen would teach me how to live." Martha laughed, but tears filled her eyes. "God's math is strange," she said. He multiplies what the world throws away. They ate, talked, and shared stories long into the night. When Martha stood to leave, Ethan walked her to the door. The night air was cool, the sky clear. "Good night, Martha," he said. "Thank you for everything," she smiled, squeezing his hand. "Don't thank me. Thank the one who never wastes a moment." As she drove away, Ethan stood beneath the stars, his heart overflowing. Legacy years later, people would tell the story of the billionaire and the maid as if it were legend. But those who knew the truth understood it wasn't about wealth or miracles. It was about two souls, one broken by power, one healed by faith, meeting in a kitchen at midnight. And from that meeting came ripples that changed families, communities, cities. Not through charity alone, but through transformation. Not through guilt, but through grace. Because that's what grace does, it multiplies.